Uh, okay, so my name is Ronald Sardarian, and I am the CTO of a company called ToneTree. So over the past 2+ years, I have been actually designing consumer entertainment AR experiences. And as you know, you just heard, that's kind of a difficult space right now because it's kind of early for that. And I just wanted to share sort of what I learned from that and some of the things that I learned are very important to consider when actually designing an augmented reality experience. And hopefully to some of you who are maybe new to the market or thinking about developing something for augmented reality, this will be something that is helpful. So why build augmented reality content? Well, right now I believe that there is actually a massive opportunity in content as opposed to even building some sort of hardware or platform, because it seems that like everyone is doing it, right? Like we have some companies here, not that there's anything particularly wrong with it, it's just that right now we're actually at a real need for people who really understand why augmented reality is actually useful for people. And you know, lucky for the content builders, the technology is actually not particularly useful without a very focused application. So what is this stuff actually good for, essentially? And also the great other thing, which I'll speak to more in a bit, is the fact that most of the time you don't actually need to, when you're starting out, the really complex hardware, you don't actually need to invest into something like HoloLens or Meta or maybe some of these other solutions in order to test your interactions and start understanding the values of AR and what it's like to design for this space. So just wanted to do like a quick overview of sort of immersive computing. So AR and VR, it's actually not really versus, it's more of a spectrum in a way. And these are both two sides. So the reason I call it immersive computing, and I've seen it called more like this as we are maturing as an industry, because this is actually the fundamental value of both AR and VR, is that it actually can immerse you in something. So before you had a screen, but now it is inside of your world. Whatever it is might be either virtual or augmented, where you have a small portion of that virtual world. So the first sort of value for AR I wanted to talk about is the fact that it's social. So while you're in augmented reality, one of the great benefits is actually one of the things that you're not taking out, which is the richness of the interhuman interaction. So you can actually still see me gesture wildly with my hands while you're in augmented reality. So for certain applications, like, for example, education, this can be incredibly powerful, because a student would actually still want to see their teacher, and this is very valuable. So VR is isolating socially, which can be bad in certain applications, but in certain applications obviously great, like entertainment, as we all know. AR holds its place in a real world context. So this is really good. This is why you see a lot of these industry applications, is because you're still in your workspace, you're still with the same people that you're usually collaborating with. Incredibly powerful. But VR can actually transport you to imaginary worlds. Helpful in things like entertainment. Once again, VR is great for entertainment. And the next thing is sort of the interaction. What's the interaction like? So for augmented reality, a great thing is that it actually extends real-life objects. When you're designing a user interface for augmented reality, this is a great benefit to you because users might already know how to use a microphone or a remote or a pencil. So you can imagine that it's not actually too big of a leap in imagination to see that pencil draw in 3 dimensions rather than just on a piece of paper. So you should always keep that in mind when designing these experiences. And for VR, you have no physical limits. So you really want to think about like what could be either more fun or what really kind of sucks about the real world, right? So kind of pluses and minuses to both sides. Both of these technologies can be hands-free, which is actually surprisingly different. Like, I didn't think this was a huge value at first, but then I realized that a lot of the technology we currently have is actually screens. So you actually have to hold something or have something in front of you. Even that like little value can already be massive. As you see, it's actually on a poster here, I realized as I walked in here. So that is actually very important. And just to close off this slide, sort of as we move into this technology, mixed reality is actually going to be combining these values. And I think that's actually the reason they use that new term, is because it's a new way of thinking about values and actually picking and choosing the two sides. So rather than the versus, sort of where is it more applicable to use, an isolating piece of content? Where is it more appropriate to extend a real object? And the one thing that I think is a really cool or an important mantra, especially here in Silicon Valley, because everybody is obsessed with technology, is that nobody cares about your tech. So why do I say that? I don't just mean that to be provocative. I mean, a little bit. But the reason I say that is because technology is a tool. It is a means to an end. So it's really easy to get absorbed in the cool holograms. It's really easy to get absorbed in the fact that I can interact with this thing 3D. But in the end, what you're doing is you're supplying a certain value. You're making somebody's life richer. So an example of that, just to maybe you don't believe me, is that, for example, if I'm, everybody, probably most of us have bought something online. If I could send a neural impulse to just know right now, and Amazon knows to deliver, cookies to my house, that would be fantastic, right? I don't really care about the fact that they have a shopping cart, the fact that they have a checkout. If that, the value in that for me is that cookies come to my house. It's not the fact that I'm using the software. So people don't actually like or want to use software. They want the result. So they want to satisfy a value. And really, if we're being super honest with ourselves, AR kind of sucks. There's infinite variables, and this is incredibly technologically challenging. Computer vision is a very computationally and battery-intensive task, and recognizing real-world objects is, spotty at best. It won't be as we go on, of course, but for now, as a designer, it actually is better to start without this in the beginning. And the other things are a little more social. So even if you got somebody to finally download your app, you've converted them to I'm going to try this out, they still have to wear something on your face, which is a problem because they really have to commit to this experience. It's not like you're just pulling out your phone and playing Peggle for 5 minutes, right? You really have to commit to an experience. So you have to make sure that your value proposition is actually powerful enough that they would put something onto their face. And right now, a lot, AR is seen as a gimmick. This is mostly due to the fact that it is a very new industry, and and I think this is because we haven't been focusing on the real value of the technology. We've seen it as something novel, holograms, fun, but not really truly applying it to people's needs. So when developing an AR experience, I think there's some important questions you should start with. First of all, like I said before, does my use case really need augmented reality? Can I do it with a screen? Can I do it with a piece of paper? You hear this a lot when developing technology, but I think it's really important to sort of repeat it because there's so many cool options for technology right now. And you'll see in a later slide, I actually don't recommend starting with what's actually an AR platform right now. But more about that later. And this question of, do these values that I outlined earlier actually match with the values of my customer or my end user? So am I actually going to be enriching their lives by putting it in there, or is it going to be seen as a gimmick? So trying to strongly sort of correlate those in order to create a compelling experience is very important. So yeah, there's a couple of platforms you can develop on. I'm sure you guys know about it. I actually recommend starting with something like Google Cardboard. The reason being, so just cut out that whole do the pass-through with the video. The reason for that is because that's going to get you something that is incredibly cheap, they still have to wear on their face, has all the basic sort of constraints and challenges of augmented reality, and will allow you to very quickly start testing whether the values of AR correlate to the values of your user. And then once your users are like, wow, I hate this thing, it's a piece of cardboard and it just doesn't work and it looks like crap, which most of the time it does, then sort of it's great to move on to something maybe like Occipital Bridge, which there's actually a new one that's actually a mixed reality platform, or of course the known Meta 2 or HoloLens. And if you don't know about those, you can look those up. I won't, that's sort of an informational thing. You can just check it out. And also it's important to think about the interactions. So you can go as crazy as Meta, where they have something like hand interactions, which are, the problem with that right now is, first of all, it's not really that stable yet, so it's hard to design for. And even the most basic interactions for something like Google Cardboard, these gaze-based interactions where you're just like looking at something and selecting it, most of the time those are enough to deliver a value. And that's really what you're trying to work on, because you don't want it to just be like, because actually using a more rich interaction can actually hurt you, because you're going to get different feedback. You're going to get a feedback about, how crappy the interface is versus whether you're actually satisfying a need for that specific customer or the segment that you're trying to design for. So yeah, I recommend going just basically as simple as possible, which is usually gaze-based because you have to hold it to your face. I just wanted to give a couple of examples of, how this sort of framework can fit into a real life use case. So commerce, you guys may have seen some solutions. I don't know which, I think there's one being presented here after a while. Fantastic tie-in for this contextual nature of augmented reality. So the very fact that you're placing a virtual object on top of the real world, this is like what augmented reality is already valuable to your customer, because they want to see what that coffee maker is going to look like in their kitchen. They want to sort of de-risk their purchase by knowing that a couch is going to fit into their living room. Right? So you actually don't have to do much for that to be valuable, right? Like if you're a developer, you know that like there's SDKs that kind of already just do this for you. Right? So that's a very strong fit for those values, which is fantastic. Then you have something like education. Like I mentioned earlier, this is a great fit for the social value of augmented reality. The fact that it doesn't block out the real world and you preserve sort of the gesturing and emoting that other people do with you. I actually really love to tell this story. So I was sitting at my house and I have a younger sister. I was trying to teach her geometry, right? And I kept trying to draw things and I'm a pretty good sketcher, but I'm not that good of a sketcher, I guess, because I couldn't really explain how to take the volume of something to her. It was pretty difficult. But what I did is I went, all right, just think about this, right? You have the width and the length, and then you just go, and you take the volume of something. And she was like, I get it. Like, that makes sense. And then she was telling me about how on the test she's going, in order to remember this thing. So I simply did a three-dimensional gesture, and that already helped her learn something. So AR is a very powerful tool to communicate 3D while also preserving the rich social interaction. So once again, very strong tie for the values in education. And here's something a little more probably hardcore, which is structural engineering. So this is actually a great tie for both of those values, maybe a little more, not that abstractly actually. So it's a great thing for the social thing and the fact that you can see the real world, another fundamental thing of AR, because you don't want to get hit by a truck or, run off of the edge or something, and you want to be able to collaborate with others, all while you want to have the contextual awareness of this augmented reality technology that actually allows you to compare a CAD model to a construction project that's actually happening in real time. So structural engineers can benefit greatly from both those sort of social and contextual natures of augmented reality. So as you can see, for a lot of these, there's actually, if you pick the correct space and the correct values and really focus in on those, you don't actually have to do that much as a designer in order to start benefiting your customer and your end user. Just trying to take that focus away from, this is fancy tech, to genuinely bringing value with your experience. So kind of an overview, takeaway. Nobody cares about your technology. It's a means to an end. Don't use AR if possible. It's hard, it's annoying, and obviously you guys are pumped about AR, which I think is great, but prototype it with a piece of paper. Believe me, it's going to help you. It's going to get you better feedback. Keep it simple. Use a piece of paper, use the Google Cardboard. If you can deploy it faster, easier, better, you're going to get more feedback, which is going to make your experience much better in the end. And most of all, test value, not technology, right? You don't want technological things actually getting in the way of you testing the genuine value for your end user, which I've repeated time and time again. So yeah, that's pretty much it. There's actually going to be a question thing after this, so I'm not going to take questions now. But if I don't answer something in that, feel free to email me at ronaldsardarian@gmail.com. Yeah, thank you.